We're ready. All right, thanks everybody. We'll get started here shortly. And thanks you all for giving up another Saturday morning to come in and have a little bit of fun with us and have some conversation related to brush clearance, fire prevention, and also some new technologies that the fire department is exploring as part of trying to make our community safer. With us today, we have two gentlemen here that have a company called Firescore AI, which uses AI technology and imaging and spectral data to help fire departments and firefighters and companies look at fire dangers and risks. So they're going to kind of walk through those parts of what they do and understand. We also have our Fire Marshal, Ryan Jorgensen, as well. He's going to cover a little bit of the program, how this will help with our brush clearance program and how those two things sort of interrelate and interact. So I'm just going to hand it off to these guys and let them take it away. All right, thanks, guys.
Hi, good morning. My name is Ryan Jorgensen. I am the Fire Marshal, essentially the Chief of Community Risk Reduction here with the La Habra Heights Fire Department. The reason that we're here is about just less than a year ago in January when I promoted into this position from having worked as a fire captain full-time on our fire engine here in La Habra Heights. I didn't really know what to expect when I got here in terms of the need for brush clearance, vegetation management, and a multitude of other items that go along with community risk reduction. And it became very evident to me very quickly that we were very overwhelmed in this division in terms of getting the inspection rate into compliance. And what I decided to do, just me being me, I decided to be proactive, and I decided to join the Southern California Fire Prevention Officers Association. And is another association, another acronym. At the time, I had absolutely no idea what was involved, and I went down to Anaheim with the Anaheim Fire Department and sat through a demonstration and started becoming very familiar with all things fire code and community risk reduction oriented. And then that's when I met Alex Moman and Dr. Flaxman, and they gave a very dynamic presentation on their product through Firescore AI, which is essentially bringing artificial intelligence through the physical AI space. And again, these are things I have learned. At the time, I had absolutely no idea what I was looking at other than a product that I could see was going to be a game changer in our industry in terms of not only bringing inspections into compliance for the city of La Habra Heights or any community that falls under the high or very high fire severity zone, but also essentially, more importantly, not only just bringing our inspection rates into compliance, but keeping this community safe from wildfire. So from here, what I like to do is I like to go ahead and hand it off to Alex and Dr. Flaxman, and move forward from here. And this is going to be an open forum. Anybody that has any questions throughout the workshop, please go ahead and feel free to ask. Okay. Alex.
Thank you all for joining today. I sincerely appreciate the time, the effort that you all made on your Saturday to come and discuss something very important. And I really want to thank Fire Marshal Jorgensen, Mayor and esteemed City Council, and the citizens of La Habra Heights for being proactive and coming here to listen. I really look forward to hearing from you all and taking in questions so we all really understand what we are doing. As I mentioned before, my first interaction with fire was with the Department of Defense in Afghanistan, where we shut down the burn pits. That was my first interaction at the age of 21. After the Taliban takeover, I came back to the United States and I met with LA City Fire Department. And they were utilizing binoculars, a good pair of boots, and really old 1970s, 1990s era technology to identify vegetation hazard. This was prior to January of this year, and unfortunately the models that we developed were just not ready in time yet, and we did not collect the appropriate data in time yet. Nevertheless, a catastrophe hit. Over 12,000 homes gone, 22 people lost their life, and billions of dollars in loss. And you also see the insurance companies walking away from California, where over 45% of the state is in a high fire hazard zone. And La Habra Heights sits in the very high fire hazard severity zone. And driving up here just now, taking a look around and really understanding the science behind what is being built with Dr. Flaxman, who comes from Harvard, graduated Harvard with structural structural ignition, and went on to become a professor at MIT, and has devoted his life to solving this bottleneck, this problem of catastrophe and destruction. And I'm really glad to see a person like Fire Marshal Jorgensen, which that day we met at the Southern California Fire Prevention Officers event. He took initiative. He spoke to me, and we came out here and really to do what we can to protect the city, the community. And that's where my vested interest lies, is to be here shoulder to shoulder with you all, with the citizens of La Habra Heights, and to support you in any capacity that I can support you. And just like my mission in Afghanistan, I'm here, and I plan to be here as long as you guys want me here, and I plan to be as supportive as I can. And with that being said, if we may start the slideshow. The issue of prevention, a lot of the technology that exists right now focuses on reactivity. And there's a great deal of technology and investment being made towards reactivity. There are autonomous Blackhawks that put out fires. There are cameras that detect smoke. Google, through the Muon Space Agency, recently launched a satellite that identifies smoke from space and gives the intelligence to the state and local and federal officials. This is all really great technology. Unfortunately, we are missing the core piece, which is understanding what's out there. If we really were to just stop for a moment and think in La Habra Heights as we sit here in City Hall, what is out there? What is the health of the vegetation? Where do the hazards exist? What would a fire look like in La Habra Heights without actually physically seeing it? So as I'm driving up here, I'm looking around and I'm concerned. And I'm sure as citizens of La Habra Heights, you all are concerned as well. And I want to know what's out there. I want to know the vegetation hazards, and I want to know how it would potentially spread, so that as a community we can come together and we can start creating a strategy, start creating strategic breaks, so that when it does happen, it's not an if, it's a when, that we are ready, and that we ran a simulation over and over, which Dr. Flaxman will go more into detail. To highlight a bit more, we really want to focus on also creating traction with the state. I hopefully will have met with the leadership of the state of California next month to be able to try to get some grant funding also allocated for La Habra Heights. This requires mitigation and proactivity. So together, jointly, I'm hoping that through this presentation, we can bring a collaborative effort in breakthrough scientific technology, citizen scientists, which is all of us in this room. Unfortunately, not all of us can get a PhD from Harvard, Dr. Flaxman, but we will stand by, personally myself, to support whatever we can do with our program now. And we can move to the next slide. Dr. Flaxman, if you'd like to start with the slide here, please join us. Thank you all.
Sure, I'll jump in from here. So I promise not to bore you too much with the science of fire, but I'm going to give you a super short tutorial on why we do what we do. So this is some recent research from Cal Berkeley looking at two slightly older fires, not the main ones in the news. On the left, the Tubbs fire, and on the right, the Thomas fire. This was the first study that's come out to look at in a causal way about what factors are driving structural ignition in California fires. And there's a big debate about all of this stuff, and it is complicated, so I don't want to get too down in the weeds. But you can see across a number of fires that there are a list of factors, and they include, for instance, flame length and structural separation. It should surprise none of you to know that both of those things are important. Exactly how important depends on the exact fire. But structural separation, it's a planning issue. You got to deal with that in planning. Once things are built out, you have to deal with the vegetation. It's the controllable element in all of these equations. So next slide, please. The core issues in fire behavior depend a little bit on the time scale, but it's usually called the fire triangle, and there are three core elements at the scale of days anyway. There's the terrain, the weather, and the fuels. And the thing about terrain and weather is you can complain about them or love them, but can't do much about it. The only thing that's under local control is the fuels. And so that's where we put most of our attention exactly for that reason. Next, please. So the models basically, I would just say overall, fire physics has been worked out a long time ago. The issue is that all the models are data limited. And so that's, again, where we put our attention. So if we have a good map of where the vegetation and fuels are, we know how to simulate fires to great accuracy. The problem is we don't usually have those maps. And there is a second problem I should mention, which is that a lot of the models were designed for wildland fire, not for WUI urban structure mix, and so there needs to be more done on the structural part of that fire. But first, you need the fire map, basically. Next, please. So how are fire maps made? How are fuels characterized? It's a little complicated, but the high level is that there are two or three things that are important, and if you've ever lit a campfire, they'll be familiar to you. So wet stuff doesn't burn, dry stuff burns. Little twigs burn a lot more easily than big logs. And the surface area to volume ratio is a fancy way of talking about that, but that's kind of what drives the physics in the fire models. And these models basically distinguish between the types of things you see out on the landscape, for instance, grass in the two images here, and the density or thickness of the grass. So again, pretty intuitive. If you've got a lot of dead grass accumulated, you've got an issue. If it's light grass and it's been mowed recently or it's irrigated, it's different in fire behavior. So very intuitive. Next, please. The challenge and the reason that people haven't done this in the past is that in fuels mapping, small stuff matters. So it's not the redwood tree, it's the needles from the redwood tree that dried out 2 years ago that you haven't swept up. The redwood tree is easy to find. It's the dry needles that are really challenging. So federal standard methods exist. They use a satellite called Landsat. It's really good for mapping very large areas quickly, but it mangles the details, especially in a wildland urban interface community like yours. Next, please. So here's an example from that national program. It's been around for decades. The pixels there, the blocky chunks you see are 30 meters or 100 feet on diagonal. And so if you imagine 100 feet relative to your house, your house fits basically within one of those pixels. And so the primary challenge is actually just that spatial resolution. Next, please. So here's our map of the same area, and you'll immediately notice it's got a lot more fine detail in it, right? So we use a different starting satellite. We use a satellite called Sentinel-2 that is 10-meter resolution, so it's 9 times the resolution of Landsat for starters. It also revisits more frequently, every 2 to 3 days instead of every 2 weeks. And obviously in fire, it's important to have up-to-date information. So we're using a satellite that is a starting position that's finer grained. The other thing that's really important, though, is the use of AI technology. When USGS interprets the data to make the map I just showed before, it takes them a year to do that, and it's all hand labor. We do it overnight, and so it's a very, very different process, but we're using AI to make sure that we can get quickly the current information and keep things up to date all the time. The other thing that we do is almost not apparent, and it will be when we zoom in and scale, but we actually take those 10-meter pixels and we divide them up into 100 1-meter pixels. And so we're able to map the fuels at 1 meter of resolution from space. Next slide, please. So what that gives you is what I call the missing pixels in Landsat. So that's all the vegetation. This is just east of your golf course. So that's all the vegetation in that area that is missed by the Landsat program that we're mapping. And not surprisingly, it's all the vegetation around structures. And so hopefully I convinced you already that's where a lot of the important stuff is, and a lot of stuff that you can manage is. So it's about, overall 40% of the risk that you can reduce in that area. It's not all of the risk, to be clear. Like the wildlands, pure and simple, have a lot of risk associated, but about 40% of it statistically can be mitigated within those urban pixels and the vegetation management right around the communities. Next, please. We're very sensitive to issues of privacy, and so I wanted to show you kind of what we see in the imagery and how we treat it. There's a few levels to this. There's, at the legal level, there's rules about where you fly what, and we do fly drones to check the data and to validate our maps. We generally fly them from and mostly on public lands, but we do gather borderland areas. And so I'll show you in the next slide, we have some masking rules, but in general, we follow the FAA rules for the drones. So we have FAA certified pilots doing the flying. And then we follow the state rules on privacy, which are very simple. Basically, no imaging of people or license plates or personally identifiable information. And so if you look at this map, this is the result of our process, basically. And you see there are a number of different types of vegetation, and there are areas around the structures that are identified, basically according to their fuel load or their flammability. That's what we care about. We don't care to spy on people, and we're not here to do that. We just want to keep the community safe, but to do that, we need to characterize the vegetation around the structures. And so we think this is a reasonable approach to doing so. So our classification only shows vegetation, buildings, and roads. It doesn't show cars, doesn't show people, doesn't show your pet. So it's a useful map, hopefully, to Inspector Jorgensen while protecting community privacy. Next, please. The categories we use are the same as the Landfire program that I mentioned, and I won't get into this too deeply, but basically, again, intuitively, it's grass on its own, shrubs on their own, grass mixed with shrubs, and so forth. So it's just mixtures of types of vegetation. Next. Wanted to look, and this is going to be hard at the on the PowerPoint slide, but I have this on my computer as well. At the city scale, the mayor asked us to look kind of overall, where's the risk, and to start to identify where the community might want to prioritize things. So you can probably hear me better. Won't be a surprise to anyone probably that a lot of the risk is in the north. But there are smaller areas of dangerous fuels all across the community as well. As a side note, the golf course, interestingly, shows up as heavy fuels here. That's the reasoning behind a lot of the fuel clearance regulations. So anyway, an example here of a detail on Hacienda Road in the northwest, and then next slide.
When you're looking at these fuels, you're not incorporating moisture yet, right?
Correct. Yeah. Moisture or weather, and so yeah, I'll skip ahead for a second and say what we're planning to do is do fire simulations on top of these maps, and I was hoping to present some of that today. We didn't quite get it done, but that is what we'll be doing after we work with Inspector Jorgensen in validating the fuel maps to make sure that we've got the inputs right. But basically that will take into account then the two other things I mentioned, the terrain and the weather, including the fuel moisture. But that's not in these maps. These are just the fuel part. So along Reposada Road, I don't know how it's locally pronounced, but in the northeast, you've got a classic wildland-urban interface, but this one has quite a bit of fuel load that's accumulated right there where the potential to bring fire into the community, right down through there. And so these are areas probably not unknown to your local fire department, but I'm pointing them out because they're big and obvious on the maps. There are a lot of other smaller details here. If this were your house, you could see around your house and see what's going on in the neighborhood, so to speak. And it is that combination of shrubs and down and woody debris along with or underneath trees that's kind of the highest risk. Next, please. So basically our request to the community, and the reason we're here today is we would like to do a pilot study here. And we're, as Alex said, we're hoping to make La Habra Heights a world leader in wildfire safety. Why not start here? If we're approved by the council, we'll be improving these hazard maps and their delivery already this season to provide increased situational awareness. But in particular for next spring, as most of you are probably aware, the state rules are changing. And so we want to be in full compliance next year and to assist the local department here in getting to full compliance all the way through the fire season. Next. Where we're heading briefly is we're taking, showed you this data today, but we'll be putting this into a web application you get access to. And so in addition to the raw pixels that we were just seeing, this will do two other things. So it'll summarize thank you. It'll summarize against census block groups. So you can look at wildfire risk relative to community profiles and demographics. So for instance, this particular block group has 4 parcels with high risk. This one has 166. So you might send the inspector there first. Also tracking the inspections that have been done and the hazards that have been identified is important. And then I guess the obvious thing to say here is I don't believe any of my own maps until Jorgensen here tells me that they're correct. So we need to do the work on the field. That's why we're here, to validate all of this approach. AI is famously crazy. We insist that it be kept under firm control for this purpose, obviously. So we want to validate the maps on the ground as we're making them and validate the predictions as we're doing them. But this will become available in a web-based interface that's easy to use and that can be used by this community to track the compliance inspection program and the improvements over time as the community does both individual mitigation for compliance and hopefully some larger hazard abatement projects that we can get some state support to help fund. And I think that's all I had. So we're ready for some questions.
From an elm tree or so?
Yes, no, it's a great question. I'll just repeat since he didn't have the mic. He was asking about the types of vegetation and the relationship to fire intensity. That is indeed part of where we're going. That requires a little fancier camera, something called hyperspectral. And so we are actually, in the last few weeks, we've been flying a hyperspectral camera around Orange County in the public lands where they have a lot of vegetation that's been labeled by botanists. And so we're trying to make that association between that specific type of camera and the vegetation. It's a little too early to say how well that works. In the literature, it works great, but we haven't applied it yet here. We hope to, at least for eucalyptus and tamarisk and some of the larger species that are palm trees, larger species of concern that have hot burning oil. We expect to be able to do that, but we haven't validated it yet in La Habra Heights.
Well, a good test case if you can use the Puente habitat, right? There's a lot of different types of vegetation there. Some of it is very combustible. So.
Yep, and we can do that anywhere we have a little bit of local expertise to label the vegetation with us. But yeah.
Yeah, the other question I have is the satellite you're using, is that geostationary? Or how many satellites you have up there?
That's a great question. So the Sentinel-2s are not. They take imagery 10 o'clock every morning in stripes around the planet. And there are 3 of them currently, which is why they have that repeat pattern. The Google one that Alex mentioned earlier will be geostationary over California during fire season, so that'll be interesting. That one is primarily for fire detection. The other geostationary satellites that we have, they're great, but their pixel size is too big for vegetation. It's usually in the 500 meters to a kilometer range. So that's the reason we don't use the geostationary ones, just because their pixels are too blocky.
So you guys are looking for La Habra Heights as a test case, as a trial, so?
Exactly, yep.
Yeah. City Council, go for it. I guess it'd be a great idea for this city.
So I have a few questions that I got through email. So some folks that couldn't be here today. So I think one of them you might have answered. You know, can you detect moisture contact so people have healthy? You know, some of the stuff we're hearing coming out of Altadena and Palisades is, you know, it might be beneficial to have very green, moist plants closer to the house to stop the ember cast from actually hitting the house. We don't want those to show up as false positives. And so I think you've said that, yes, you are getting to the point where you can determine the moisture content, and that'll factor into the determination of the hazard.
Yeah, exactly. For that, we've been training against these stations that have existed for decades, actually. The Forest Service has had out there in the woods live fuel moisture stations. And so we're training our model against those to predict the fuel moisture in different plant types. I haven't done it here, but I have done it for BC Hydro, for Pacific Gas and Electric, and for Southern California Edison. I worked on the visualization side of that. But for Canada, we got 92% accuracy in predicting the live fuel moisture on a daily basis. Wow. So it's quite accurate. It does require a lot of training data, but fortunately the feds have been collecting that data for decades, so we do have a lot of training data.
Thank you. Yeah, so that was kind of the next question that I had was, when people cut weeds, right, a lot of folks just leave so maybe it's a 3-foot tall weed and they cut it and now it's laying on the ground. Is that going to have a false positive for your system, or does it recognize the height? And is there a concern with that, that fuel laying flat on the ground when people cut their weeds in the city?
Yeah, that is an interestingly hard problem right there. It's roughly at the limits of our detection technology, depending on what exactly we're flying. We use USGS LiDAR, which has 9 points per square meter over the whole country. And that gives you an indication of the understory vegetation, but it's an indication, not a full measurement. And as you get closer to the ground, there's more noise because the LiDAR has to penetrate the canopy, in this case from an airplane. So it's not that accurate about low fuels close to the ground are very hard for that to distinguish still.
So that's where you got to put eyes on it and
Yeah, so it's probably a good example where the inspector's job is still safe. There are a lot of things that under the canopy, under thick brush, need human eye to validate. We basically can give a map that's a probability map and tells you where you might first go to look, where there's highest confidence that there is likely understory, dry understory, but it's still an indication, not a direct observation. And so you certainly wouldn't write a compliance ticket over that, but it might tell you the right neighborhood to check.
And then there are some, I know you brought it up in your presentation, but there was a question about how do you get accurate readings under the canopy?
Yeah. So
I think people are worried that you're going to fly drones down underneath their trees to see what's underneath them, but that's...
It does go both directions, but the way we're doing it today, there are basically two types of cameras in the air and on satellites. So there are ones that are top down or orthogonal, and there are ones that are oblique and take pictures at an angle. And so we're using the oblique ones to get a view of the canopy from the side, and that gives us an indication of what's going on in the understory, especially in Southern California where things are broadly more open. It has trouble in redwood forest, as you might expect. So it is an issue if you're sensing from the air. We do use the oblique sensors to do best we can from public data at that elevation. And then that's also what, when we do fly drones, for instance, in public lands, it's that association of the top-down view and the side view that we're training the model on, so that in the future, when it sees something just top-down, it estimates what's under the canopy, which is actually exactly what the Landsat program has done with the Landsat pixels for a while, right? They have a bunch of classes that talk about the understory vegetation, even though it's only partially observed from Landsat. So we're doing the same thing, but with higher resolution sensors. Sir.
Yes, my first comment is that council, please, yes, I would approve this. I approve this. I think if we need every little bit of help we can get. My first clarification is that will you be using drones or not using drones in La Habra Heights?
We will be, but only for calibrating the data and flying with the fire department. So we won't be doing anything on our own. And we will only use them to calibrate the imagery that I showed you.
So
And if I may add there, we're going to focus on the public land, so avoiding flights over structures, and it will be in accordance to FAA regulation, along with Fire Marshal Jorgensen.
Okay, and my other question is that pictures is worth 1,000 words. I was really looking forward to seeing some kind of a simulation of a fire with fire breaks in place and one without fire breaks in place, so the residents could get an idea of what it's like if you let things go by themselves during a fire, as opposed to fire breaks in place when something happens. So I think as soon as you can get that, I would really like to see that. I'm sure many people would. Thank you.
Yeah, John, we had talked a few times this week about trying to make that happen today. It just, the computing horsepower needed to do that, and how they just recently got some of this data. So, but I'm right there with you. I've asked them to do exactly the same thing. Actually, what I asked them to do was, and I know this is going to be pretty horrific, but start a fire in La Habra Heights January 6th with the winds that we were seeing and with the fuel conditions as they were. And, you know, for those of you that were awake at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, January 6th and January 7th, I mean, we had some the strongest winds I've ever seen in my 25 years of living here. And I know the mess that I woke up to the next morning was you know, pretty significant. So that's what I've asked them to do is show us what it would look like, a fire starting in La Habra Heights, you know, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning on the 6th, which is when, you know, we saw the highest winds in the city. And let's look at what that looks like, because I think people will be surprised at how fast that fire would have spread. So.
And we are definitely committed to supporting that effort. We couldn't quite bring it to you today, but we will definitely do that, including the the negative hard case scenario, which is worth looking at, but also some mitigation scenarios if you want to bring those forward as a community. We're happy to simulate a fuel break or other mitigation measures. And I think particularly for the state, if you want to make the case for hazard mitigation, that's probably the best way to make it, right?
And that's the other thing too, is to try to justify getting some grants in the city to do some of the abatement activity that we need to do. And you've heard, you know, Mike and Alex, they're willing to help support us with that.
Dr. Flaxman, thank you for being here today and presenting your product to us. Is it my understanding that Firescope AI modeling is not used by any other agency? We would be the first agency to use it?
Sorry, maybe introduce yourself because you have a unique
Richard
standing.
Beckman. I'm sorry, Richard Beckman, Avocado Crest.
And you're a former...
Retired from the fire service. I teach at colleges, wildland and structural fire technology, and work for the LA Area Fire Chiefs Regional Training Group. So my question is, are we the first agency in California to use it?
Yes, you would be the first to come under contract. We are in discussion with other agencies, but you would be the first.
Okay, and then if we use drone technology, will we be able to get species differentiation in copses of wildland growth? Cow pepper versus sumac versus tobacco. If we use drones, we'll be able to make differentiations to that level.
So far, as I know in the literature and in our experience, yes, that's the only way to do so. People have tried to do it from satellite, but it obviously does depend on the size of the species. So for things that are big and extensive, the highest resolution satellite available, there's a Canadian hyperspectral one that you can do some of this with, called Wyvern. That's what I used in Canada when I did the work there. But 5 meter pixels are not usually good enough for the invasive species, some of which you just mentioned.
Okay, got it. And is your product integrated with Esri for the mapping?
It is indeed, yeah, I should have mentioned that, but the web map interface I showed you is actually done inside Esri's software. And so, yeah, we think it's really important all this stuff be intercompatible. And so we're actually an Esri startup program member as well as an NVIDIA startup program member. So both of those companies are helping us with hardware and software.
So could this, if we stepped away from prevention and into operations, could this get integrated into Ontera or Tablet Command, those Esri-based products?
It could indeed, and we haven't talked to the Tablet Command guys, but that was one of our immediate ideas when we first saw that product.
Okay.
And for those not familiar, Tablet Command is used for incident command, and so it can, for instance, live map where all the fire engines are, and so we do think it's important to have better fuel maps in that context as well, in an operational context.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your time being here today.
So you would only, okay, I'm concerned about insurance. And, you know, like in medical, everybody wants to keep their records secret, so an employer wouldn't turn somebody down. So how does this work in the insurance industry if, it sounds like you're only going to be mapping at this point the open space? Because if you do a map of the city and identify all people that have problems, will they have trouble getting insurance?
I think it cuts both ways. I guess we should start off by saying under current state law, the insurance companies can't discriminate for good or ill, one way or the other, based on this risk mapping. However, that is changing as of next January, and they will be not only allowed but required to offer discounts for good behavior. So if you're legally compliant, but just barely, I guess you'll pay the highest rate. And a little like auto insurance, if you are proactive and you take other measures, they will give you discounts in the future. We don't know exactly how this is going to work because it hasn't happened yet, but that's the change in the law that at the state level come January. And obviously, it goes both directions. I guess I would say there is a National Institute for Insurance, and the mapping that we're doing would support their fire safe definitions that the insurance companies nationwide have agreed to use for risk reduction. So it's better information. Exactly how it gets used is still in question. I would say that the insurance companies already have better information than the public information. So your rate is already based on high resolution imagery, for example, even though the state is not using that. So I would imagine this would actually, on balance, help more than hurt in that more people will be eligible for discounts and the insurance companies will have confidence that the landscape is being maintained where it's being maintained. But local mileage may vary, as they say, so no promises there. But I think it's early in those days, but we have been in contact with the state and the state commissioner. The rules are changing, but nobody knows what that change is going to imply relative to California.
Any other questions?
John Steele, Las Palomas. Any information on what the costs are going to be? Is it going to be by square foot, by square meter, by,
For your community only, we've agreed to provide this at a very, very low cost of $300 a month for the pilot program. We haven't announced general pricing for the world yet because we want to pilot it first year and make sure it's useful to folks.
Well, that seems very affordable. Thanks for your generous offer.
So, there are some policy questions that I'll save until we get the council in place, because I think there's some questions about, how the city will use the information, how the city will incorporate the information into our brush clearance program. I don't know that we have answers for that yet. My background with my company, I'm very familiar with the work that Firescore AI and other companies do in the brush risk assessment space. I mean, we operate millions and millions of miles of wildland interface and square miles of wildland interface, and knowing where to spend money is always our primary focus. Where do we get the biggest risk reduction for the dollar? And I look at how we do brush clearance in the city today, and it's not very scientific. It's where our fire marshal sees a problem and goes out and addresses it. And a lot of times the cities, for those of you that don't know, city spends a lot of money on brush clearance every year for non-city properties because people refuse to do it. That's money that comes out of our general fund. And my question has always been, are those the right dollars to spend in the right place? In other words, if we have a limited budget to spend every year on doing brush clearance, shouldn't we be understanding where we get the biggest risk reduction for the dollar? And yes, a property might be out of compliance, but is that the one that we need to be spending the city dollars on clearing, or should we be spending them on another piece of property? We don't have the answer to that yet. And I think even with the most basic pilot that we can do using satellite imagery, we can begin to get those answers very quickly and start doing a better job of spending our money, our city money, on where we do brush clearance and holding those properties accountable, whether they're open space lands like the Habitat that needs to do more along our interface with our city, because if you saw the map, there was a lot of fuel up in the Habitat. And I'll tell you, in the January 6 winds, we all know the direction they were coming from. They were not coming from the ocean. They were coming from, from inland. They were a north to south, or, southeast, or northeastern to southwestern wind. And that's going to come right through the Habitat. And if a fire starts there, it's just going to blow those embers right through the city. And that's what happened to the Palisades, and that's what happened to Altadena. Was the fire started in the wildland interface, and the embers got blown directly through both of those cities, or both of those areas. So, I mean, that's at least my immediate thoughts of how to use this is out of the gate, use it for some very simple risk management and getting the right properties started to get cleared. And, as we go forward, I mean, sounds like a very reasonable amount of money to get started with and see how it works as a pilot in the city. Look to use, how it can get applied within the city. I think there's some bells and whistles that they mentioned that, we'll see how they work. So for example, every 2 to 3 days, we get an update through the satellite imagery. That's something that the chief can look at. And if we're seeing, so for example, a high fire day, if we're seeing a high wind day, we're seeing, hot days with forecasted oncoming winds, it could help with stuff like pre-positioning, apparatus, calling in people if we need to get more people here, because you can forecast what it's going to look like using the fuels and using the winds and weather. So some additional things, not on day one, but I've been told that it's soon that capability will be there. Along with, I think there's a commitment for some members of the community to also have access to this. So, I'd like to get, obviously our city manager to see it so he knows what's coming, people on Fire Watch and other places that may be, that may be key to getting the message out to the community that there's, a high fire potential coming. Hopefully we'll never see anything like January 7th again, but, there were a lot of warnings about the wind and the weather coming, and I'd like to see something a little bit more scientific for our community about what we need to do in the days leading up to that so that we're prepared for the next event. So.
Would this be public information? All the maps and meaning the city council is paying for this, so our tax dollars are paying, so is it public information?
I think it's up to the council ultimately.
So I think what Mike has talked to me about is there is an interface that could be made available. I would expect that if we got into an issue like a high fire condition, that that information absolutely could be made available to the public.
I'm talking that, but more purposes for insurance. So we can take it to the insurance company and say, hey, here's our fire score, here's our whatever, here's
your property, if it's specific to your property.
Right.
Yeah, the only time I get nervous when we talk about making something public is if someone does have an issue with their property right and they're working with the chief on doing it, and that I get a little.
I get both sides. I get both sides.
I get a little nervous there. We do plenty, I think, of public shaming in the council meeting when we haul someone into, a property in to deal with it. So that's the only reservation I have is.
But also, one other thing regarding the fires up in the Palisades and Altadena. If you're doing the public lands, the water department has the water tanks up there, has our pumps up, pumps in places that brush could be cut back further, but we run into the habitat saying, no, they want the brush. So the fire destroys the inside of the tank, and then your tank's gone. So it looks fine from the outside, but the fires have destroyed the tanks in Altadena and Palisades and other things. So it is something to look at with the water, the fire hydrants, etc.
We talked about the brush and all that. Do you get into the structures themselves to distinguish between stucco siding and wood siding and a shed in the back and all of those elements? Because home hardening is a big portion of this too.
We haven't so far, but that is within the scope of the hyperspectral work. And so one of the things that we've started to look at there is that wood, when it's treated for flammability, usually it's phosphorus that's put in, basically, and that is detectable from the hyperspectral. And so I would say it's preliminary. We don't know whether that could be operationally put into the field, but there are some early indicators that there's technology that would be able to detect. We got a lot of wood out there that hasn't been treated recently, and is definitely more combustible. But that's not in our immediate roadmap. That's something we're just looking at kind of ourselves at a research level. You can also tell roofing materials, and so that might be another easier one to get, actually, because the roofing is all exposed. So if you want to know Class A roofs in particular, that's another major component. Or I don't know if they're grandfathered wood shingled roofs here, but there are in some parts of the state still. So those would be relatively easy to detect.
Well, so I was wondering, I don't think we have any anymore, but there, you can get a Class A wood roof if you do the underlayment and the treated shingles and all that. So how would that show up?
It would have to show up in the material properties as seen in the hyperspectral sensor. So that's one I don't know, not having done it yet, but if it could distinguish that. And there's I'm pretty sure it can do the opposite, because I have looked at this, the fake wood fences that are actually metal. It gets those, no problem. So it's not fooled by brown paint, but wood on top of a Class A roof, yeah, I'm not sure.
All right, so did you have another question? Yeah. So next steps. I've asked Rafferty to agendize this on the October meeting to have the discussion about moving forward with the pilot. So if you support us moving forward, I've heard a couple of folks supporting it. If you support us moving forward with the pilot, please try to attend the October meeting, and in public comments, let us know that you support us moving forward. Same if you have concerns. If you have concerns, I'm happy to address them. I think everyone knows how to get a hold of me, so if you have concerns, feel free to reach out to me. Chief Jorgensen is another person that you can reach out to if you have concerns about this, but I'm really hoping that we can move forward with the pilot this year. Even though we're going to limit the use of drones just to the calibration side of it and in public space, not flying over the city. But the real power of the tool eventually comes when you can get the additional input that the drone provides the city. But I think we've got enough work to do in the city that the pilot is going to keep the chief busy and help us prioritize those areas that need that work. That'll give us the biggest risk reduction for the dollar. And then, we can, at the end of the pilot, we can take a look and see how effective this is and determine if it's something that we want to continue. So thank you all. And I'm sure that, Dr. Flaxman and Alex will stick around for a little bit if you guys want to ask more detailed questions about the tool itself. And I'll stick around too.
We absolutely will. I'll just add, I should have put a slide on this, but Alex and I are both happy to answer questions by email if you think of something later. It's just Mike at Firescore.ai or Alex at Firescore.ai. But yeah, we'll hang around here and happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Thank you. And I really want to thank everyone for their valuable time in coming out today and excellent questions. This is how we come together as a community. And you can't fight fire with fire, but you can tame this fiery beast, and it will show up. And so when it does show up, we'll know how to tame it together as a community. And again, you have my commitment, shoulder to shoulder. And also, my son, who's been here a few times, made a special request to get Krispy Kreme donuts. So we did get Krispy Kreme donuts. It was a special request. I don't know which type he ordered, but it's outside. So I look forward to chatting with you guys outside.
I would just like to thank everybody for showing up as well. And I do want to reemphasize, this is a tool. This is not going to eliminate the need for boots on the ground fire inspections. This is simply a tool to assist us in essentially making the inspection process more efficient so that we can come into compliance with, in totality with 100%. Okay, but essentially at the end of the day, this is another tool in our toolbox that will really assist us in protecting this community and reducing the risk of wildfire. So thank you again. Appreciate your time.